Hello everyone, welcome to the Future Work Scotland. Thank you for joining us for our September session. It's great to have you all here. Really looking forward to this session. We're very excited about it. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, if you've not been for a while, I'm your host, Sathpal Singh, organiser of Future Work Scotland. I'm joined by my co-organiser, Donald Henderson. We're thrilled to have you here. We have a very simple code of conduct. We simply ask that you be respectful for one another. We want everyone to have a great experience, enjoy the session. So that's all we ask. It's no more complicated than that. As ever, we'll have time at the end for Q&A. So we'll have 20 minutes or so. Tibisay is happy to take questions as we go as well. So we'll build that in. Yeah, really look forward to it. And we'll do any announcements, etc. at the end. If you do have anything you'd like to share with the group at the end, please, let us know, and we're happy to give you an opportunity to share that just as we close out the session. And with that, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Tibisay Vera to our September session. Donald and I have been looking forward to this session for quite some time. We've both bought copies of our new book. His copy's arrived, mine's is not, so I'm feeling a little bit aggrieved about that, but I'll not dwell on it. Tibisay's got a lot of experience, extensive experience in the change management space. She's been doing this quite some time. She's the creator of Pet Model, which you probably read about in her bio. And as Donna was holding up there, she's the co-author of a new book, which we're very excited about, and she co-authored that with Melanie Franklin, who I also know. So we're thrilled to have Tibisay here, and we're really looking forward to this. Most of us are in the change space in some shape or form. I've done years and years of change programs, transformation programs, so I think it's very, very valuable to hear a little bit about how the neuroscience of all that can work, and we can use that positively to affect positive change and encourage the resistance to change. So with that, I'm going to hand over to an amazing guest speaker so we can all learn more. Tibisay, welcome to Future Work Scotland.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Donald, for inviting me to be here, and thank you to all of you for having joined. I'm so excited that you're joining from everywhere in the world. I'm based in London, originally from Venezuela, and I'm very excited to be here. It is really a special month for me because, as Seth said, we just published the book last week, so I cannot hide not to be happy, having 2 years of really hard work for it. So I'm very, very excited. And the intention of today is just to share a little bit with you this research that it has taken about 10 years, specifically to find that intersection between neuroscience and change, and also to talk a little bit about the Pepe model, which is basically just the summary of all this research and a quite practical model of put it into practice. So it is going to be very relaxed, as Seth say. I don't know how many of you know or have heard about neuroscience. Actually, it would be nice if in the chat you say, I'm totally new into it, or I have worked a little bit, so I can have an idea of more or less who is there in the audience. As I say, it is going to be very relaxed. We will try to keep big questions and good interactions towards the end. So I think we will dedicate about almost 20 minutes, Seth, in Q&A. However, if in the meantime, when I'm presenting, if there is a question that you would like, please do it, because it's no point to keep a question until the end if it's something that you really didn't understand or you are really keen to share. So that's what I say. Let's do that. Let me just share my screen so we can officially start and put this into presenter move, and to make sure I have my chat open. Hello. Sorry, I think I can hear somebody unmute. I'm very happy for you to unmute the phone if you want to say something. Otherwise, probably we will just have it mute. That would be great. Excellent. So I see that, yes, you have been some familiar with neuroscience, quite new for me. Right, I can see psychologists. So yeah, it may be some people who are more familiar like others. We are going to keep it quite simple It's quite deep, but I like to keep it simple so like everybody could follow and understand. So we will build it up. So the idea is to try to find these interceptions between neuroscience and how we can adapt positively to change. And when I say adapting positively to change, first maybe let's try to define what I mean for how we can use neuroscience to adapt positively to change. And I like to kind of say that positive adaptation to change is kind of equivalent to this terminology, which is called active resilience. In the science world, now we are in the scientific world, we are starting to use the word active resilience rather than resilience only. Basically, because the traditional definition of resilience is kind of bouncing back, right? And that terminology comes from metallurgic war about bending and then you try to bring it back to the original state. And this is what resilience traditionally it is. Where we know now, and I will come back about how this relate to the brain. We know that active resilience, more than bouncing back, is bouncing forward. What I want to say is the intention is not to going back to where we were. Otherwise, what was the point to going through all that change? So the idea is not to going back to where we were, not to bouncing back, to actually use that change for something positive and to growth. And that is the concept of active resilience. And there is a lot of research within neuroscience, actually at cellular level, that resilience or active resilience, it has to be with growing, and not only for what we used to call homeostasis, which was coming back to the normal values, but to new concept that I don't want to go deep into that, but for the ones of you who are into science, is more called allostasis, which is not only going back to where it was, but to change through change. So that's what kind of it is positive adaptation to change. What does it mean is that when we adapt positively to change, we are able not only to cope, but also to grow with any change, and also use that transformation, that change, to actually thrive. And not only with one change, but with many change at the same time. I think, I don't know how many of you are in the field of change, but for the ones of you who are, you might be used to seeing kind of this curve, and there are many out there, so I don't want to relate to one specifically in mind. But it is usually the idea that when a change comes, we start in this shock phase, and then we go into the full integration. I'm challenging here that thought, because I think we are living during times that not necessarily this is relevant anymore. There are so many changes coming at the same time that by the time that with one change we're in the denial, another came and we're again in shock. By the time that we manage to integrate one, we are making decisions based on one, we're in another in shock, probably we never integrate one that already started, and so on. So I think managing change from the pure perspective of going through this cycle of change, it helps in terms of methodology. However, it doesn't help in trying to recognize where we as an individual facing the change, we are, right? And that is the idea. That is the idea with positive change. It is not about moving as fast as we can or moving through that change from the shock to the integration. It is more about how do we do to, at any point on time within this curve, or at any point on time of many changes, of constant changes coming all at the same time, how do we deal with it? How do we prepare? How do we wire our brain to be prepared to deal with that, right? And what I would say is that, and this is basically when all this research started 10 years ago, it came through observation that I had, many people had, saying during times of change, what we tend to see the most is, well, there is usually a lot of resistance. We tend in many ways to have or to work sometimes under a toxic environment. And we tend to work under high pressure, high levels of stress as well. And as a result, there is lack of engagement. Now, what we also observe is that after we adapt to one change, we're talking about this curve, if we integrate or we manage to get into the integration part of one change, or we're going through change in a constant way, what we tend to happen is the result of going through that one change or multiple changes is that within the organization, then people build a lot of cynicism. There is a lot what we call trauma, and I don't think we use a lot the word trauma within an organizational setting. However, change could be traumatic for many people. Also, there is disengagement, right? A lot of people as a result of a change that not necessarily went well, there is a lot of disengagement. It didn't meet their expectations. And also sometimes there is a lot of lack of innovation. Why? Because lack of creativity. When we are under huge amount of stress, our brain does not support creativity and innovation. So basically all this research came into that idea. When we speak about trying to find ways to adapt positively to change, is we are trying to avoid this picture that we got in front of us. We are trying to help into two areas. First, during times of change, are we facing a change now or multiple changes now? How do we do to help with that resistance? How do we do to make the environment more helpful and less toxic? How do we do to make stress to work for us rather than against us? Stress is not a bad thing. It is how we manage it. It is how do we, and I'm introducing here a vocabulary that we're going to talk later. How do we make those peaks working for us and then going into the valleys for not burn out? So that is what we want. We want to be able to increase creativity and basically to be what we call a transforming organization, right? A transforming organization that adapt positively to that change. So that's what we're talking about. That's how all this research came. And what we found is that if we understand how our brain works, if we understand what happened in the wiring of our brain, every time that we don't meet or a change doesn't meet our expectations, every time that a change feels painful and we don't do anything about it, when we are running, dragging out of energy, if we understand that, how the brain works for that, we can do something about it. And that is all what we are after. I think I've been talking a lot about it, and I would like to bring that question to any of you in the chat. Can I ask anybody or to write in the chat, why do we have a brain? What is the kind of fundamental role of the brain? So we can start to talk a little bit of the neuroscience here. Why nature, God, evolution, whatever do we believe on, gave us a brain for? Happy for you to, if you want to unmute or if you want to write something in the chat. Survival, yes, Rebecca. Survival. Anything else apart from survival? To be able to make judgments and stay safe. Yeah, again, with survival. To protect us and to sustain us. That's very nice, to keep us safe. navigation of the environment. I really like Nigel, who say to sustain us. And I'm going to complement that. So I'm glad I saw sustain us. And I don't know exactly if you mean what I'm going to expand here. Make sense of the work, learn what's good. So yes, I think the main role of the brain, as many of you say, it is to help us in one way to survival. So the first thing that it does is to protect us from threat. Now we know that it also does something else. And probably so far, most of the literature which we read focus mainly in the survival part. But we know on the top of the survival, it does also seek reward. So what does it mean? Is the main role is to ensure the perpetuation of the species. And I don't know, Nichols, if what you mean with sustain us, you meant that perpetuation through time. But so far, this is what we know. It is the role of the brain. So as a result, obviously, we have a lot of functions, and our brain have a lot of connections to keep us safe, to survive, to protect us from threat. And I think as a result, it helps us to navigate in the environment, as Scott say, to regulate our body, like Nick say, to make sense of the world. So when I make sense of the world, it will help me to protect from threat, but also by making sense of the world, it will help me to approach food and to approach the person or the animals, because this is the brain of animals as well, not only human beings, that I will be able to pass the genes to. So that is kind of the main role of the brain. And why this is so important? Because what we know now is that there is a really nice equilibrium between threat and reward. And if we want to promote a positive adaptation to change, if we want to help to overcome resistance, if we want to increase well-being during times of change, we need to find and to tune into that fine balance between the threat and reward system. In fact, it is the key also for high performance. And let me explain you better what do I mean, right? So let's imagine we have threat on the left, rewards on the right. Threat and reward have its own chemistry, biochemistry, which I'm not going too much in detail. I just want to give you some examples of some of the chemistry that it comes from both sides. From the threat system, when we feel that we are under threat, when we feel like we have a lion in front of us, when we feel like we don't know what is coming next in this change, when we feel like we have not been invited to a meeting that I was supposed to be there, when I feel like people are not communicating clearly, when I feel like I am not in control of the situation within the change, then I am under threat. And our brain does not recognize if it is a lion in front of me or it is not a lion. It behaves exactly the same because we live in a modern world with a very ancient brain. A brain that kind of the last kind of evolution or signal of evolution happened about 3,000 years ago. And that was a very small signals of evolution. The real big evolutionary changes within the brain is about 40,000 years ago. So can you imagine we live with a 40,000 years old computer in our brain? And as a result, it behaves exactly the same. It doesn't recognize, it doesn't make any big difference between a lion in front of us who is going to kill us or a lack of communication. The result is the chemistry is exactly the same. So those are some chemistry that it comes adrenaline, and I think most of you are familiar with it. It comes noradrenaline, which make us focus, very attentive. Because you imagine we are having this lack of communication and everybody is looking like, oh, have you heard anything about this merger? Have you heard anything about this new software that is coming? And everybody, all the gossip is there. This has a noradrenaline. Then on the other side, we were talking about the reward system and that fine equilibrium that we were talking about. And the neurochemistry of the reward system, it's more like feeling good chemistry. It is, for example, dopamine. When we are flow of dopamine, then we feel excited, right? When you feel excited about something, is because we have a lot of dopamine. When we are taking risk from a positive way, I perceive that risk like I am in control. I'm taking risk. Yes, it is risky. I'm out of my comfort zone. But I approach it with a growth mindset, positively, then I release that dopamine. I also can release endorphin when I'm celebrating, when I feel pleasure about it. And then there is oxytocin when I feel like I belong to, when I feel like I have been invited to be part of the change. I have been invited to say something, when I feel connected to the values of the project, of the values of the organization, of the values of my team. If I feel like-minded, then our brain will release oxytocin. And why it's so important is because I feel trust, right? And it makes us feel rewarded. So you got this very quickly, and that's the maximum I promise I will get into neuroscience in that sense. Why is so important? Because when our body and our brain is flow of threat biology on neurotransmitters, we tend to have some behaviors which are kind of narrow-minded or very focused as well. If we have a lot of noradrenaline and adrenaline, we are kind of sharp, focused. If we are able to meet a deadline at the time that we can. So it is not bad being under threat, right? It is not all negative. It has some positive. It's just depending what do I need it for. On the other hand, when I'm full of neurotransmitters like dopamine, endorphin, oxytocin, the behaviors that I tend to have much more open-minded, I tend to be very excited, motivated, I trust others, and most importantly, I tend to be very creative because our brain becomes very insightful when we are in a rewarded state. What I'm saying is, and I'm inviting you to see this line that we have in front of us. It is a line that we should be able to control and to decide what neurotransmitters and what biology do we want at one point in time in a proactive way, and not let that chemistry just to come by chance, right? So we need to make our biology to work for us very much rather than against us, as I say. So what I'm saying here, it is, say for example, if I need to complete an activity for tonight, it is good. I need to use that adrenaline. So being under threat, a little bit of threat, it is actually what I need at that point in time. Now, if what I need to complete by tonight is something very creative, that is more challenge, because if we are too much on the left side on the thread, I will not be very insightful. So I need to be more towards the right? So if I want to be in a, what we call into flow, into that peak performance stage, ad hoc, at one point in time, it helps to be on the left side a little bit. Now, that is not sustainable. That is not sustainable high performance. If we want to be sustainable, we need to also go to the right, come back to the left, right and left, and to have that dance. We're talking about change today. For change in particular, we need to be more towards the right. Why is that? Because if we think about the different behaviors that we require for when we are going through change, obviously, through change, we need to be open-minded. If we are close-minded, we are much more resistant to it, and then we don't learn the new way of working. To facilitate change, we need to build excitement in in the end users, in the audience. We need to be able to get people motivated so they get the energy that they need to going through all the pain of learning new things as well. Most importantly, we need people to go with their own insights. They are willing to learn new ways of working. That's the reason why we need to be more towards the right. So this is something very interesting. When I learned that equilibrium, that fine tuning between threat and reward, have made me think a lot about, do we usually are in control of that? Are we usually aware of it? Or we just let ourselves be driven by emotions that we don't know even if they are emotions, but we are driven by emotion, by situations during the change, and then we are probably working with the biology against us. So knowing this is very interesting because it makes us more under control. What is the big challenge to change, right? And why we are so resistant to change? Well, from the brain perspective, we are not wired, and when I say wires, is functions and the way that our brain make connections. We are not wired for change. If anything, we are wired to first resist, right? Change goes really against the principle of survival that we were talking about. If you imagine 40,000 years ago when we have this machine with us, the Asian brain, anything that it changed in the environment, it meant that I would probably be at risk of perpetuating through time. I would probably be at risk of not passing my genes anymore or to be killed. So that's the reason why most of our functionalities are there to resist change first. Any questions so far, I think, or any comment? I see you all very quiet and not see a lot of in the chat. Happy to carry on, happy to answer any question, any thoughts, any insight.
Nothing in the chat at the moment. So, yeah, okay. Nothing in the chat. So just
super. So if I'm going too fast, I'm going too much in detail from the neuroscience, let me know. Okay, so basically what I'm saying is, if anything, oh, Patrick, you raise your hand, so very happy to open the microphone.
Hi. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Really enjoying this. I was just noting, and I appreciate the theme, and I also appreciate the need for adapting to change. I was wondering in the previous slide with the threats and reward sweet spot on the brain, you notice it appears to me that under behaviors that on the, let's say, reward side, those terms, open-minded, excitement, motivation, and so forth, are, let's say, positive or have a value of being a good thing. And while on the left, on the threat side, narrow-minded, anxious, et cetera, those evoke for me like a negativity. And I'm wondering if these behaviors might be framed in less value-centric ways. And I guess the comment that's the question, the comment I'd have on the left side seems like unnecessarily negative. I guess that's the fastest way to say it. I apologize. I'm just seeing this for the first time. I'm just trying to make sense of it. So appreciate your feedback on that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely. And it's a great question, Patrick. Yes, they look more negative, especially when we say narrow-minded. Narrow-minded not necessarily something negative, isn't it? Sometimes we need to be narrow-minded. If we are operating something and it's working well, A to B, and it's pure operational, and I don't need to improve it today, to be narrow-minded, to be able to complete it fast, it is a good thing. However,
right,
narrow-minded,
I guess I'd say narrow-minded is kind of has a negative connotation.
It is a connotation.
It like is phobic of various differences and so forth. That's basically what I was
It is. And I think the invite here and I think that's why I mentioned when I explain this, there is not that is good or bad, it's depending what for. And that is the importance of defining what do I want to achieve. It becomes negative when I become narrow-minded during a change that requires for me to be able to listen to others and to listen opinion of others. Then if I'm narrow-minded there, then probably it's not as positive, right? So that is what I mean. Now, from the, as you call it, positive side, from the reward side, excitement could become negative. And that's the reason why in the line, if we go towards too much to the right, it becomes addictive, right? If we have too much of dopamine, we become addicted to it. And I'm not going to get into the details, but social media, it is a great example. Cocaine is a great example of being too much of dopamine. I mean, dopamine endorphins are potent drugs as well. So if we are too much on the right, they're actually not necessarily positive. So at a certain extent. However, I think I totally understand, Patrick, what you're saying. There is this kind of connotation about what is positive and what is negative. What we know, that obviously it feels better for the body. It feels more pleasant for the body to be more towards the reward. Now, my point here, it is we should try to define what it is my objective, what am I after, and now trying to promote the chemistry that I need to.
Thank you.
Great. So I hope that answered the question. Right. So let me come back. Thank you, Patrick, because that illustrates a little bit, and it's not only me chatting to everyone. So I was in the point to saying that we are wired to first resist. Now, when I say that we are not wired for change, a lot of people challenge me, and because we know now that there is a functionality of the brain which is called brain plasticity. For the ones of you who are familiar with the terminology, brain plasticity, all what it is the ability of our brain to adapt to new things, right? And yes, we have brain plasticity. And as a result of having that functionality of brain plasticity is that we are able to adapt. So the fact that we are not wired to change first, we are wired to resist first, it doesn't mean that we are not able to adapt, right? We are able to adapt. And the difficulty is that adaptation could be a bad adaptation, right? So the brain plasticity works in both ways. Into the positive side, because we are able to adapt. Now we are also able to bad adapt. Brain plasticity is not only for the good things as well. So then what is the challenge to change is that the first thing. So we are first going to be resistant, the way that we are connected to the change. And then the other challenge is we could bad adapt. Why we are not also wired for the change is because when we make an announcement of something new is going to happen, there is a lot of uncertainty, right? From the people's perspective, let's take the example of a new software we are implementing or a new digital product transformation. What it happened is people need to change the way of working. If a new software comes, people need to learn the new functionality of the software. If we are having a restructuring within the organization, people might lose their work, their jobs as well. People might lose their status, right? I was an expert. This software was my baby. And now you're giving me a new one. I'm going to lose my status, right? Because now I will look like people will not respect me because they expect the expert in this. So I lose my expertise. And as a result of all that, my brain is like if it have a lion in front of it. And as a result of that, it will release a lot of adrenaline, a lot of noradrenaline, which noradrenaline will be helpful at one point in time because it will help us to be focused and attentive about what will happen. But if it's too much of it and I don't let it go down and I keep it up and up and up, I become hypervigilant. And then I start to listening gossips, and so on, right? So then it becomes toxic because it remains all the time into threat mode. And when I am into threat, then I can become very aggressive because I am having too much of that threat biology and I don't let it going down. And what we say earlier, that to facilitate change, we need to be much more open-minded, to be able to listen the ideas of others. We need to be a little bit excited. We need to be motivated. We need to have creativity, to have insights, and so on. So that is a real, from brain perspective, that is the real problem that we are having when we say, yeah, we need to remove resistance to change. And we look at it from a technical perspective. We say, how are we going to remove it? We need to go into the brain perspective because we are working with the biology against us. We need to do something to, in an artificial way, to start to give dopamine, to give oxytocin to our brain, even if it doesn't see it. And that's what I call hacking our brain or tricking our brain to be able to provide a little bit of that chemistry so we can help a little bit that adaptation. So the good news is the brain will always adapt to change. 98% of any change, physically, psychologically, at work, personal, we will adapt to change because of the brain plasticity that we were talking about. The bad news is the price of that adaptation could represent a very high cost for our body and for our organization. We saw earlier that our brain could bad adapt. In neuroscience words is maladaptive plasticity, which actually our brain physically change. Our brain physically maladapt. And that maladaptation, as we started this conversation, means I will withdraw, I will have a lack of motivation because that adaptation that happened will make our brain to release less and less dopamine, or other way around. If I've been exposed too much dopamine and I haven't rested either, then my brain will increase the numbers of receptors of dopamine, and as a result, I need more and more to be able to feel motivated. And if I bad adapt, then I will create cynicism, which is what we're talking about. And when we have a cynic organization, if we have 2 or 3 people cynic within a team, it's very contagious. Because our neurons, we have a neurons called mirror neurons, and it's very contagious. And when we create or we live within a cynic organizations, that is where poor performance comes. That is where, from the change perspective, it's very difficult to find change sponsors because there is no trust and so on. And then from the well-being of everyone facing change, we tend to suffer in terms of chronic stress, burnout, and so on. And then if we go too much into the reward side, going back to the question of Patrick earlier, then we can go into addiction. So that is just kind of the basis of what is the connection between neuroscience and change. And here I wanted to introduce you a little bit to the Pepe model, which is based very much into 4 big areas that we know we can, don't like to use the word manipulate because it sounds negative connotations, but 4 areas that we know proactively we can do something about it. And 4 big areas that we know that is the main reasons why we resist to change. And the first one is about pain. When we are going through change, our brain feels that it is too much under pain. As I said earlier, I need to learn new ways of working. Before I used to know the whole system. Now I have no idea how the new system works. I'm losing my status. With an integration of 2 organizations, a joint venture or a merger, I'm losing physically my status. Before I was here, now I'm down. And that is painful, right? So pain, our brain doesn't distinguish between physical and psychological or emotional pain. It behaves exactly in the same way. So change is painful. Whatever it is, even if it's positive, we feel pain. Also, on the top of that, our brain also resists change because the energy. Our brain consumes too much energy. It consumes about 20% of the total energy of our body, and it only represents in terms of an organ of 2%. So it have a big difference in terms of consumption of energy. And we all know that change consumes a lot of energy, don't we? So if we do something about saving energy, it could help us. Or if we do something about releasing energy, it could also help and facilitate change. The other is peaks and valleys, fluctuations. What we were talking earlier. If we go too much excessive to the reward side and we don't fluctuate it and we remain high, we will bad adapt, we will burn out. We will be totally narrow-minded when we don't need to be narrow-minded. But if we're going too much into the reward, we will become addictive, or we will need more and more of endorphin, more and more of dopamine to be able to feel motivated, because our brain will adapt, will create those receptors that we were talking about. So we need to make it fluctuation, because when it fluctuates, our brain say, oh, I need the same amount of receptors because now I don't have much. Oh, now I'm not too much into burnout, I rest. So we need to help that fluctuation. And the last element is the error. When we are in front of change, our brain releases a huge error signal, basically telling me, oh, that is not like my expectations. And that error signal circle back into pain and make it really, really painful. So this is what are the bases of Pepe model, which it have 4 domains: pain, energy, peaks and valleys, and errors. And what we're saying is that by knowing those 4 domains, then we can do something about it. It's no point to knowing all this theory if we cannot do anything about it. And that is where it comes, the 8 dimensions of the Pepe model. We basically have 2 dimensions per each domain. So in terms of pain, if we could proactively do something to reduce the perception of pain, I'm already a little bit helping the resistance of change or the positive adaptation to change. If instead of reducing perception of pain, I could do something to increase pleasure, I'm also helping with the pain. Why is that? Because our brain our brain use the pain and the pleasure system very much together. So it is overlapping. The circuit for pain and pleasure, it is overlapping. And that's the reason why in many cases, when there is a bad adaptation between pain and pleasure, we sometimes need pain to feel pleasure, which are bad adaptations, really. But if I can do something about increasing pleasure and helping to reduce pain, then in terms of energy, if I can proactively help you to save energy as an individual, I'm also helping to reduce the resistance. If instead of saving energy, if I do something to help my body to release positive energy, and we know, like for example, dopamine provides us a lot of energy. We know that adrenaline gives us energy. Now, if I proactively trying to find positive ways of releasing adrenaline, I'm helping as well. It's just like, and that comes peaks and valleys, I need to let it fluctuate. So if I manage my peaks, not let it for too long, only when I need it. If I manage my valleys and my resting, then it helps my well-being. And to be honest, this is beautiful. This here we are talking about organizational change, but I'm hoping as you listen this talk, all this apply to our personal life, actually, very much, right? The secret of well-being is managing that peaks and valleys, very much, and that is what it creates resilience. And then we're talking about the error. If I can do something to reduce the mismatch between reality and expectations, because that is where the error signal comes. when there is a mismatch between reality and expectation. If I can do something to reduce that mismatch, it helps. And also, if I can do something to release positive prediction error signal, it also helps, because basically I'm providing my brain with positive errors. It sounds strange, isn't it? But it does exist. Positive errors from the brain perspective exist, and they actually feel rewarded. So that is kind of the Pepe model. And I wanted just to illustrate it here. How do we use Pepe model, and how we can use and to have some tricks to help this positive adaptation to change. Let's take, for example, the first dimension, which was, let's do something with pain. Let's imagine we're announcing this change and I'm losing kind of my status, or we don't know what is happening next and there is too much uncertainty. So what can I do to reduce that perception of pain, that I don't know what it happened tomorrow, I don't know my status in the new organization, or now I'm losing my expertise. So one of the first things that I could do, for example, very practical, is trying to increase the psychological safety within the team or within the organization. It sounds easy, it is not. What psychological safety is basically creating that environment that people don't feel they are going to be judged or penalized if they made a mistake. In change, this is key. If I'm losing my expertise because I was the owner, the expert in one software, in the software, and a new software come, if I feel like I'm not going to be judged or I'm not going to be penalized for now not being the expert, it feels, I'm not reducing the whole pain, but I'm moving towards the right. I'm moving of being less resistant to the change. So this is first thing. Now, how do we do it, right? How do we increase psychological safety? Well, we could try to avoid this blaming culture. We can promote trust at different levels, right? And we can create habits. I always like to speak about habits, because habits come naturally. All what we're talking today, it sounds really nice. We go into the day to day, and when we have a new change coming, we will forget about this step by step. Now, our brain will not forget if we already have a habit built for it. And this is what we're trying to do. When we were talking about a transforming organization, when we were talking about that we need to create habits to deal with constant change, and not only to go through the learning curve of a change, we're talking about that we need to build those habits even when we don't need it. So for example, one way to build a habit that it will help to have a blaming culture, which on return it will increase psychological safety, it could be, I could start sharing mistakes openly. I could start to create a culture where people feel okay to share failures, to share mistakes. I can start to focus more on the learning part of it. So that is how we can use. I give you another example with a different dimension, which is the dimensions of the valleys. We were talking about trying to allow these fluctuations between the peaks and the valleys. So what can we do? And a really good idea it is about trying what we call balance anticipation with pleasure. What do I mean for that? When we are in a hunting mood, anticipating something, working towards a milestone, working towards a goal, our brain will release too much adrenaline because I have a deadline. And if I perceive it that I want to do it, or I'm taking a risk of it in that anticipation, it will also release a lot of dopamine. But we say that if we are too much in that hunting, our brain will bad adapt. Either it will be addictive or it will burn out, either way. So I need to try to balance and to promote some pleasure within the anticipation. Why do I mean? It is, for example, how do you do that? maybe I allow for incubation periods. And I think that's the reason why, for the ones of you who have heard about agile methodologies and work in change within agile, we have done a lot of works where we have kind of demonstrated that agile tend to be much more brain friendly than waterfall way of managing change. Why? Because within waterfall, we tend to have more of the time in the peak, we're anticipating something, anticipating. Within agile methodology, if we apply as we should, where we have 2 weeks of a sprint, and then we reflect and we have some reflection sessions, that will help us to allow for incubation periods. So what we should do, and even if formally you don't have agile within your organization, we need to try and within the big project to try and to allow to have peaks within 1-2 weeks, and then have incubation periods where we stop and we reflect of what do we need to. And we not only we reflect, but we celebrate what we have done well. So we basically say, how much have we progressed, right? And we're trying to remain as much as possible at the present moment. So for example, within Agile, after those 2 weeks of a sprint, we should really respect and trying to remain within that day of celebrating what we achieved. Even if we are still far out to the final end, we need to celebrate. So including systematic and proactive ways of celebration within project, it helps a lot. That habit of celebration, it helps us a lot to have the valleys and to allow those fluctuations that we were talking about it. I give you another example. And here I'm giving you some examples for the Pepe model. I think, Donald, you got the book, so you can read some of these strategies. I think we have identified about 38, 39 different really practical strategies that comes as a result of the 4 dimensions of the Pepe model. So another example that I give you in terms, we were talking about the dimension of saving energy. We were talking about that we need to help our brain to save that energy because it consumes too much energy. So what could I do? Another practical example that we have is we can help the brain, for example, to spend the energy in the important, right? And also to avoid overloading. How can we do that? What about if we provide the right amount of information at the right time? Sometimes we make an announcement and we want to go too much in the details straight away, and we are providing too much information, our brain becomes overloaded. Or other way around, we make an announcement and we don't say much about what is going to happen. Oh, there is too much uncertainty. If there is too much uncertainty, our brain is starting to increase the level of energy to trying to find out what is going to happen, So providing the right amount of information at the right time is very important. And we can create habits for it. Remember that if we create those habits before that a change happens, or while many changes are happening, but if we create the habits, then it will have much more opportunity to put it into practice. So for example, we can create habits that we can ask, before a meeting, we have these habits to think in. Am I providing the right amount of information? Maybe I'm focusing in too many details too soon, right? That habit of us before going into a meeting to think, am I providing the right amount of information? Is it? Only that little thing, that habit saves a lot of energy. Am I inviting the right audience? How many of us sometimes get invited to 10 meetings that we don't need to be there? Or sometimes we are not invited to one. So those habits to trying to think, do I really need to copy this person in that email? That helps also to save energy. I give you the last example because, oh my God, this is already 8. I've been talking too much. I give you the last example, which is about releasing positive predictions errors. So what can I do to help to reduce that error signal that at the end causes pain? And we know that familiarity, our brain likes familiarity around, right? And we know that if we provide familiarity, our brain will release positive predictions, error signals. So what can I do to bring familiarity? I can ensure pattern recognition. What do I mean? Our brain loves patterns, right? They like to know how things work and to imitate what has been working well, how has been working badly, and it likes certain patterns. And if I allow that pattern recognition and helping our brain to release this positive, so what habit can I create? Well, I could probably trying to identify and to reinforce every time, what is this not changing? How many of us going through a change and we talk about the benefit of the new change? Yes, it is important to talk about the benefit, but at this point in time, I'm in pain, man. I'm in pain to think like, I'm losing my status. It could have a lot of benefit, and it might have one in 6 months' time, but at the moment, I'm in pain. I'm losing my status. It is the reality, my reality. So if instead of only focusing on the new operating model in the benefit, I'm not saying no focus on benefit, but I also focus on, hey, the people operating the software will be the same, for example. So if I try to identify what it is not changing, what is going to remain more or less the same, and I reinforce that idea, and also helping the brain with some positive signals. So these are just some examples of how the PEPL model work. Thank you, Donald, for putting some of the links here in any case that you are interested to know more about what we've been talking about. What is interesting is PEPL model had been endorsed also by the Academy of Neuroscience and Education, from the pure science to secure. When I created the model, even as a neuroscientist, I wanted to make sure nothing was fluffy out there. So with the Academy, we went to a really rigorous review in terms of the science. There is so much myths out there. And also Pepe is kind of the backbone of the book, the new book. So in the new book is about Pepe and very practical ideas of how to put this into practice. And it is also the backbone of the neuroscience certification, Neuroscience for Change, that is given by APNG International. And next year, I think we will have some diagnostic tool and kind of a digital suite that we are working on to come next year. So I will leave it to that. I think I probably I opened the microphone. Sath, if you want to say something, anyone, any question? Are you with me? Oh, yes, I am. Suddenly I thought, oh my God, I lost the connection.
Just a quick comment, if I could. I've been working in change for a long time, and everyone talks really broadly about what to do, how to support people, how to manage change, but I've never seen an actual structured framework about why to do the particular things, when to do them, how much to communicate of a particular time at a particular time. And it's really fascinating. I like things which are more structured and more scientific, and this is a real eye-opener.
Oh, thank you both for really that positive feedback. It is fascinating. I mean, my intention of today is to give you a little bit of this virus or bug that I think I have since I studied neuroscience. My first background was not neuroscience, was in finance. I studied neuroscience 12 years ago, and I became passionate about it. Exactly for what you're saying, Bob, because I think if we put science into really practical, we take it out of the lab and we give the why, right, as you say, but not only the why, but we also use it proactively. I think it's powerful. So thank you. Glad to hear that, Bob. I think I see something written. You say authors such as Carol. Yes, Carol, I know Carol very well. We've been doing something together. And Hillary, yeah, has discussed about neuroscience and organizational change and arrived at examples, coping strategies, such as mindfulness. Yes, that the PDP model have elements that move things substantially forward with the action and initiative that may be undertaken by an organizational initiative rather than relying on the individual. Yes, it does. We can do it at individual level. So the Pepe model within the valleys, we also talk about mindfulness, which is at individual level. I think at organizational level, I give you an example, and this has to be with providing pleasure, right? Pretend, and it has to be with the pain. We say that one of the ways to deal with pain is to provide pleasure. We know that oxytocin helps us to change our perception of pleasure. What do I mean? When we have high level of oxytocin, our pleasure, we feel much more pleasure. And when we feel much more pleasure, there is less levels of pain. So let's take it from an organizational perspective. If at organizational level, I manage within my team to release oxytocin, then I already have in my team having a little bit more of pleasure. Now, how do I manage my team to release oxytocin? Well, we know that our brain releases oxytocin when I feel part of something, when I have a sense of belonging. So if I have a sense of belong to a team, then I will release much more oxytocin. And then I have much more pleasure to work within a team. Right? So this is at organizational level. This is an example that Pepe model work at an organizational level. Also, I give you another example in terms of dopamine. I need, sorry, excuse me for a sec. I know that I need to provide energy to the brain. We didn't see a practical example here with providing energy. But we know dopamine provide energy, provide motivation. So at organizational level, if I build excitement, so say, for example, when I'm building excitement within a change, if I build excitement within the team, within the organization, within the project, I'm building that moment, I'm creating hunting, right? And that is the reason why those ideas of making some announcement and you kind of have people working in that hunt of getting what they want, that release dopamine. And that dopamine slowly give me that, that energy. So I can do that at organizational level. So I hope, Britam, that answer your question. But in short, yes, I think Pepe model will talk about individual as well as organizational level.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Is this actually discussed in the model itself? Are these aspects included in the module in the model? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yes, definitely. They are included in the model. So the idea how the model works is within these 8 dimensions. We really go into the detail, very practical, trying to understand how it works, why it works, and what I can do about it. And we like to go really into biology level because, as I say earlier, I think it's much easier to work with the biology in our favor rather than against us. If I need to promote creativity within a change project and I am flow of adrenaline and non-adrenaline, I will not get that creativity. So at organizational level, I need to do something to promote insights. I need to do something within my brainstorming sessions to promote insights. And here we talk within the certification and within the book, we talk about what is the best way to conduct and to have brainstorming sessions, for example.
Isn't this extremely difficult to get management to sign up to this kind of view?
Sorry, I missed that, Pritam.
I was just wondering, isn't this extremely difficult to implement this kind of culture within organizations?
Oh, yes, it is. It is not easy. I would not say it's harder than any other implementation. It is. And I think the key to implement it is not to take all the 37, 38 strategies that we provide. No, it is trying to really think and to diagnostic where am I in the organization or within the project. Is it about pain that people are having, or it is more about cynicism, it is more about energy? And if I trying to think where I am and trying to identify only 2 or 3 habits to implement at the time, it is difficult. Yes, we are talking about here human behavioral change, which takes time. It doesn't happen from one day to another one. And however, I think creating a small habit at both individual and organization, it will help us to move forward. And it is very utopic only to play with the biology. I mean, at the end of the day, people go home, and if the person who is in the change goes and stay in the mobile phone all night, well, it will be flow of dopamine. So it is not only based on what I'm doing. However, we know that if we have certain control of it, right? So this will not be 100% pure only the dopamine because of what I'm doing. But at the moment, if I need energy and I have the dopamine and I have processes and procedures and habits that promote that, it helps. That's what I would say. Naomi.
Hey, can you hear me
Hi.
okay?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you
Nice
for
to
a
see
very
you.
interesting session. I'm a HR partner, so I was
excellent.
interested in your perspectives on how to communicate organizational change, like restructures. So it tends to be something we reveal at the very last minute when we know all the answers of what it means for people. And I think that's done to try and avoid uncertainty and people being concerned maybe unnecessarily, and the worry that comes with that. I wondered what your advice was on that method versus signaling what something's coming, and then you kind of have the people dealing with it for a while, but maybe being less surprised when it happens. So could you talk a bit how you would communicate change in organizational restructures based on the model?
Yes, this is a great question. As I think there are a couple of things that we need to consider here. One of them is first tone of the communication. It could be to avoid people, as you say, start to be worried about something that we don't know yet. And another one, it is also by legal reasons. Probably we are not necessarily allowed, especially if we're talking about redundancies, we are probably not allowed to talk about redundancies as well, right? So it is a mixture of different things. Let's leave the legal reasons aside for the moment, and let's talk more about the uncertainty, which is what you just mentioned, right? And I think if we know, and if people in the environment, people know that there is a change coming, I think we should introduce it, right? Because now because if people have no idea about what it is coming, right? Then probably we should introduce only what is necessary for them to know, for not to become too overloaded. I am the one who believes that when a change is coming, we should communicate that is going to be a change. To avoid uncertainty, we should work in providing some certainty. So rather than communicate, as we say earlier, in the big change, we say, yep, we are going to have a merger. Say, for example, let's imagine within this merger, there is no an issue of redundancy for legal reasons. Within the merger, some positions will remain the same, others will change. Within the one that we will change, we will provide the training, we will do it with some anticipation, and then we give assurance. What is difficult is we cannot remove the uncertainty of the change, but we can provide assurance. And that, I think, is how we will communicate the change, is by communicating it and providing assurance as soon as you communicate, rather than leave it out of there. But I'm a big believer that a communication of change early enough with the right assurance and with the right environment of psychological safety, it can have a big help. I don't know if that helped, Naomi.
Very helpful, thank you.
Super. Patrick.
Hi, hey, thanks. Thank you so much for your presentation. I love this stuff, and I echo Bob's comment. Really appreciate the structured approaches, the examples that you gave. I think are very practical and relevant. So I'm really glad the Future Work Scotland brought you here today. So this is like fantastic. Earlier I asked a question about the perceived threat side of the of this equation, and I have two questions for you. And this may be kind of beyond your brief and not what you're usually do, but I really am curious about your take on it. So I have two questions. One is under what circumstances, if any, do you think people should refuse to adapt to change and instead take a stand against threats to their health, well-being, and dignity? And what advice do you have for people who find the change that they're confronted with to be unacceptable?
That's great, two questions. Let's talk first about adapting to change. I'm not sure we as a human being are in control of adapting or not to change, right? Even if I refuse to it, I will adapt. I will probably bad adapt, I would say earlier, but I will adapt. As a result, we can see many changes that happen. I adapt, right? I could be cynic about the next one, and that cynicism is a result of adapt. So can I ask you, when you say I refuse to adapt, what do you mean? You mean I refuse to accept the change or to work in the new ways of working, or what do you mean?
I think you're exactly right. I just wrote that down. I think adaptation might not be the word I'm using. It's like the change. Yes. So all interaction with a change is some kind of adaptation, but whether or not people accept that change, since change so often is imposed externally from governments, commerce, technological advances, the medical community, so on and so forth. So those sorts of things. And so it's like, I guess there's always an adaptation, but there's a quality, a difference of quality of embracing the change versus resisting it. So I was just wondering if you had thoughts on that. So you'd substitute adaptation for resist, I guess.
Yes, exactly. So, so your question here is, what if I decide to keep resisting to the change?
Under what circumstances should people refuse to accept these imposed changes when they believe them to be threats to their survival, their health, and their well-being or their dignity?
Yeah. So I think is, as you say, change sometimes is imposed to us, and it's very rare that I can refuse not to go with the flow, right? Most of the time I have to go with the flow, right? Because that's the way the organizations work. That there is a new law coming, there is a new system. So if I refuse and I start to go against it, what is going to happen is it's impacting my well-being or my dignity, as you say. And if I keep resisting it and resisting it, then obviously this is going to be detriment to me and to the teams. And I think that is the reason why I think as an organization we need to avoid people come to that place. And I can avoid that by creating habit, not at the time of one specific change, but I start to creating it right now. If I start to create that psychological safety that we were talking about, where people don't feel they are going to be penalized, if I create an environment, right, that of that fluctuations and peaks and valleys, where people can go and rest and not be all the time in the peak, and to have some reflections and some valleys at the organizational level. If I create habits of celebration, and especially celebrating progress rather than big achievements. So if within an organization I create those practices, right, and I make sure those are embedded within the line managers, within the team, and not only at HR level, like a nice to have, then it's much harder to find people who will kind of resist to it. Of course, you will always have someone, as you say, well, I don't accept it because this goes against my values or my dignity, right? And at one point in time, probably this person just has to go, or that person will just need to go with the flow. But it is not about doing it or not. I think it's more about how do we do it? How do we make sure, and here is how I will rephrase it. It's more about how do I make sure people have a good experience during times of change, that it will help the organization not to be a stuck organization, but a transforming one. That's how I would say. Hope
Thank
that
you.
answered your
Appreciate it.
question. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I forgot your second one by now. If you
Yeah.
have another question.
Oh, we should let other people
Okay.
talk. I think there's other people want to say something.
Sure.
Thank you, Tibisay.
You're more than welcome.
No, you're good.
Anybody else?
There's no other questions in the chat, Patrick, so we can definitely address your second point in the remaining times.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Seth. Yeah. I guess what I heard you say was that you said that resistance to change is detrimental. What advice? And the second question was so I'm not sure if you have any advice for people who find the change they're confronted with to be unacceptable. It's like, is there a place inside this conversation for people who say, you know what, I don't like that. That's not good for me. I think that is bad for my health, let's say, and therefore I'm not going to participate. So is the only choice those people have just to withdraw from the organization, from the relationship, from society, etc.
And I think that's important, again, and coming back to that psychological safety. I think that person who has the right to say, I don't want to participate in the change, they should feel confident to go and say it. That's what I say. That is where the place is. In many cases, people say, I should not participate in the change. I hate it. I don't like, I don't believe. And probably this person might be right. It might have reasons that we have not heard about it. If I do have a psychological environment and I have habits of not making judgment at any level, that person is most likely to talk openly and not at a gossip level or just to withdraw. If I have channels of people being able to express their concerns, it might even help because it's only one person, but it might have a valid reason for it or not, but at least it's expressing it. There is something that we know in terms of the brain, which are the emotions, right? Why do we have emotions? And this is from neuroscience perspective. And we don't talk a lot about emotions at work. Emotions are tangible, right? All what emotions are is the combination of chemistry and electricity in our body. We put names into that sensations of that electricity and chemistry, and those names is what we call feelings, right? So, for example, I feel frustrated. It is the name that I put to a sensation that happened in my body at a conscious level for most of us, and suddenly it feels that I am frustrated, right? So why I'm saying that is that emotions are tangible and it's chemistry that it comes. And the reason why they exist is because it's the way that our body communicates to us. It's the way that our brain communicates to us. So if I feel frustrated because a change comes, like in the case, Patrick, that you are saying, I feel frustrated for it. And if I don't say it, if I don't have channels that allow me to share that frustration, what is going to happen is that emotion at my level is going to increase. So the sensation that I'm having for frustration is going to increase more because I'm ignoring it, and it's going to increase more. Why? Because the emotion exists for suddenly me to realize, hey, I feel frustrated. Do something about it. That's why that chemistry comes. If I ignore it, it will become anger. And that's what we need to avoid. What we need to allow within change and at organizational level, it is to allow and to build channels that we allow people to express their emotions. And we need to train people in what emotions are. And I think when we speak about emotions in that way, for some reason, people start to talk about emotions at work because it sounds tangible. So I hope that answered your question, Patrick.
Yeah.
To me, it's
thank you
about
very
building
much.
those channels.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Super. Great.
I think we're
That's
up on time. Yeah, that's great. So just that point you made at the end, just for a start to wrap up. So your model, and imagine there's linkages directly into the whole body of work around emotional intelligence, and
it is very compatible to emotional intelligence. We don't explicitly talk about emotional intelligence. We speak about emotions, as just explained, and the difference between emotions and feelings, as just explained. However, it is very linked to emotional intelligence, because what emotional intelligence is about is to build in self-awareness about how to manage our emotions, right? And I think the model help us to understand that. But there is not a direct connection, put it in that way, or an explicit connection to emotional intelligence.
Great. No, brilliant. Great. I'm going to start wrapping up because we've got a few minutes left, and I think Tibisay, you've answered a number of questions admirably over the last 20 minutes or so and early in the session. So absolutely fantastic. Really great session. Lots for everyone to reflect on and unpack and digest. We've shared links to the book, also to the website where you can learn a little bit more about the Pepe model, and also Tibisay and Melanie have 2 upcoming courses, so dates are in. So we've shared the URL for that if you're interested in that.
Yeah, we are training it together between Melanie and I. So the certification at the moment is both of us, which is great because she is quite expert in terms of change and examples. Yeah. And
you've kindly shared a 20% discount for the community. So
yeah, very happy.
Share all the details in the chat if that's of interest to you. There's dates in September, dates in November. Do please take a look. Donald and I are both interested in it as well. So if I can make that work with work commitments, etc. But do take a look, and if that's of interest to you and you want to do it, then yeah, please do sign up in the remaining spaces that are available. And just to say, thank you for your session. Thank you for joining us. It was wonderful to host you. It's a very important and very intriguing topic. So thanks for sharing, and looking forward to my book arriving hopefully for the next few days.
And anyone, if please do connect to me in LinkedIn. I always like to hear about people who join us. Please do connect to me as Tibisay Vera, or if you want to Pepe Neuroscience as well, but at least to me. I'm always very approachable. So any question that you have, if you get the book and you have any question, Tibisay, I don't understand this, drop a line.
Please do connect with Tibisay. So yeah, that's us. Thank you all for attending and joining us. Thank you for your participation and contribution as well.
Thank you to inviting me, Sath and Donald. I'm so happy to be here, and I will be joining others of your talks as well.
You're always welcome. Just to say, unusual for us in this group, we have yet to publish the remainder of the sessions for the year. We've got a few open conversations. We're working through those, so do look out for them. They should appear over the next few weeks. Normally we have to wait months in advance, but we deliberately kept a little bit of a gap this year. We do have some open dialogue, so we will get that sorted over the next few weeks. So do look out for that. And Donald's also shared information around the upcoming Lean Agile Scotland conference. If you are in Scotland in the Central Belt, or if you can't get to Edinburgh later this month, do please attend that. It's always a fantastic conference even, and we support it at Future Work Scotland. We have done for a number of years. Many of our fellow community organisers and friends are involved, and I'll be speaking this year. So it's the first time I've ever done Lean Agile Scotland. I've done a number of the conferences and this family of conferences, but not this one. So doing one closer to home. So yeah, it should be great. There's lots of great stuff in the program. So look out for that. And again, there's a 10% discount for you available as well if you want to join that. So that's on the 25th, 26th, 27th. So just check out the information we've shared. And yeah, just thanks again for coming, and hope we'll see you again soon. Look out for the sessions, and enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you happen to be, whatever the time it is, whether it's your evening or your afternoon or your day's just starting. It was great to have you here, so thank you, and look after yourselves. Speak again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And
Take
thank you
care.
for all the nice message of that I have been reading. That give my endorphins and my celebration. You are hitting the
again, Tibisay.
dopamine and the endorphins. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Very well.